Hello again. So I'm going to continue on discussing staging and for the vernacular medieval drama. I think we finished with this, that there's these variety of different kinds of plays. So I want to show you some images. I will try to just highlight a few things, but you have a link to a Flickr page, and you can go ahead and look through that by yourself for a little bit. So let me move on here. So if you follow this link, it takes you to this page where, really scary, 10 years ago, the University of Toronto hosted the Chester Cycle. So this cycle of plays that was originally done at Corpus Christi in the town of Chester, which is in England. And they farmed them out to different organizations, many of them from universities, but also from some churches. And there were some people from Great Britain. There were some people from Canada, which is where the festival was, and a fair amount from the United States. So Shenandoah took a play up there. So I think that there's something like 26 plays in the Chester cycle, which is nothing compared to the 46 or 47 that are in the York cycle. So they begin at the dawn of time, at the creation, when God creates the world, and they go all the way through to the Last Judgment. So just to give you a few little things here, this is a pageant wagon. The University of Toronto has 7 of them, and every now and then they do these things. I was also part of a 1998, I think it was, they did the York cycle, and I acted in that one. So then they managed to do them about every 10 years, at least they did. So they have these pageant wagons, and they tell you, okay, your pageant wagon is going on, the yellow wagon, and these are the dimensions. At least one of them has a trapdoor in it. This is what you've got to work with, and anything that you want to put on the wagon, you need to bring with you to Toronto. So that's one of them before it's set up. For an example of something that is vaguely medieval looking, you've got, this is who you might think if we're talking about the creation of the world. It's God. In the Middle Ages, gods, angels, devils were all masked. So generally speaking, if a character is seen unmasked, they're human. If they're seen masked, then they are something other than human. That's generally the way that they did it in the Middle Ages. What Toronto does is it doesn't tell people you have to do it in any particular way. So you see a lot of different choices in these pictures. But this one, we've got God the Father, and this is, I think, an angel and musicians. There's tons of music in this material. You can get probably 5 to 7 people on these stages. When you start to get beyond that, it becomes a little tight. This is Lucifer. Lucifer talks about his plumage. Lucifer is the proud one, is the light bearer, is the one that's going to become Satan. But at the time when he's an angel, then he's Lucifer. So there's a lot of kind of, look at how wonderful and beautiful I am in the text. And so this is Lucifer with the feathers. There's a whole staging issue of feathers and devils, and that's another research project. So just for reference of how big we're talking about, and about how many people actually show up to watch these things in Toronto is fairly impressive. People show up. They show up at 6 a.m. They show up at 6 a.m. in the rain too. I want to show you. Let's get back. Yeah. So once Lucifer falls from heaven, the way that they did this was that they came out from underneath, the devils came out from underneath the wagon to represent hell being lower than heaven. So let me images. I just wanted to show you the Shenandoah pageant really quickly. So our pageant was it's called Octavian and the Nativity, which is kind of funny. I mean, it's kind of funny, like, why do those two things go together? So it's the Nativity of Christ. It's the actual sort of Christmas story that most people are familiar with, where Joseph and Mary go to Bethlehem and there's no room for them to stay anywhere, and they stay in a stable. And the Christ child is born. The animals even respond to it. All the stuff that's in Christmas carols is in the play. But it begins with the Emperor Octavian hearing that there have been these signs and omens, and the senators. So this is the Emperor Octavian. It is Jake Emerling, who you may have met or run into at some point, because he does make frequent return visits to Shenandoah. And these are the senators who come to speak. So obviously we did it modern dress. The emperor when he hears that there's these strange omens, he goes to a sibyl who's really a fortune teller. So our fortune teller became this sort of hippie fortune teller with burning incense and that kind of thing. My concept for it was, okay, we're telling this story, apart from the Octavian part, we're telling the story that pretty much everybody has heard, the story of Christ's birth. And no matter what your faith is. And my thought was, well, what would happen now if this poor couple with this woman that's about to give birth showed up somewhere and there was, no room at the inn, there was nowhere for them to stay? And I wanted to reimagine it very much from an Appalachian Shenandoah point of view. So our backdrop there, which is painted, is a painted backdrop. We brought that with us. It's supposed to represent the Shenandoah Valley. Here's Joseph and Mary making their way to Bethlehem. The costuming had just run a mask making course, I believe, or at least they had done some mask making in the course. And so we had a couple of people who were involved with this project who really, really wanted to make the animal masks, and they did, and they're pretty spectacular. So actually what happened was the senators then doubled as the animals. And let me tell you, everybody was talking about our animals. We were like rock stars with the animals, which is pretty funny. This was our angel. The mask was retrofitted from a Lady Gaga party. Thank you, Shenandoah students. So it was a shattered mirror. And this is Joseph. He was, a carpenter. He had a tool belt. And so there's this funny thing that happens in the Chester play. And it's part of a legend, but you've probably never heard it before. And the legend is that Joseph, when he realized Mary was about to give birth, kind of was like, oh no, I need help. And he got midwives to come and help. And the legend goes that one of the midwives, after the birth is mysterious and wonderful because there's no pain involved. And that after the birth, one of the midwives says, this woman is still a virgin. And the other midwife said, that can't possibly be true. And she goes to do a manual inspection of Mary, and her hand is withered. And then, because she can't believe her hand is withered and oh my God, this must be a special baby, she ends up worshiping, being actually the first person to worship the baby Christ. And her hand is instantly healed. And this little episode, which is curious, and I could have a lot to say about it, but it is a curious incident. And it's the first miracle. So this is in this play. So these were our midwives. They were in scrubs and they were on a coffee break from the hospital, and they just happened to be passing by when Joseph called out to them and said, hey, please come and help. We did this with sort of Virginia and Appalachian accents. And so they came up with their hand sanitizer and helped deliver the baby. And so that whole sequence of the hand withering and everything is in there. So if you want to look through, you can see some pictures of that. There, I've heard people speculate that there was a special prop for the withered hand, which is completely stupid. If you look through the pictures, you can see how we did the withered hand. Also, we had a trap door so that the baby, the animals are masking the trap door so that when they go kind of underneath Mary, they're bringing the baby up from under the trap. Anyway, so you can look through these pictures. It was we became sort of famous. Everybody was talking about us. I had people that I've been following and reading their scholarship for a long time coming up to me and just saying, I don't know how you did that. That was brilliant. So it was very rewarding. And sort of bizarre because it was all sort of very logical stuff for me, to make it personal, to make it immediate, to make it recognizable, and to kind of not bring down the holy figures to our level, but to make them recognizable to us so that we can sort of enter into the story, which is that whole point of effective piety, which was very much part of the drama at this time. So they took 2 days to do these plays for Chester and at this festival, maybe 2.5, because then there was sort of a conference afterwards. Because the Chester cycle, there's records that tell us that they didn't try to smash all the plays into one day. They actually did them over several days, over like a holiday weekend. Unlike the York plays, which seem to have been done all in one day. So when we did the York plays in 98 or whenever that was, we started at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the first play started at 6 in the morning in the rain, and then the last play finished at the 4th place of playing at about midnight. So to play the whole cycle took that long. There are still people publishing about how is it possible that they did these plays all in one day? Were they out at night? There wasn't electricity. There weren't electrical lights. Were they doing things with lanterns? There's so many things we don't know. The Chester cycle, the York cycle, there's records that tell us that at the height of it, because it was done over many years, they performed in 12 different locations in the city. So if you do a play that's 20 minutes long and you do it 12 times, plus pulling your wagon to the next place and resetting up for the next show, that's 4 hours of performance, not counting the pulling your wagon. So when we think about these plays as amateur civic endeavors, we also have to remember that these people who were doing all these parts were performing outdoors under less than perfect conditions for possibly up to 4 hours of outdoor performance. And that's really extraordinary. A lot of actors now can't do that. When we did the York cycle, when we did 4 places, so 1/3 of what they would have done, everybody was exhausted. Everybody said, I don't know how they did it 12 times. It's crazy. It's crazy. So there are a lot of things that fairly recently, in the last 20, 25 years, people who study medieval drama have actually said, hey, let's do these plays and see what we learn about doing them. And so I'm fortunate to have kind of entered into the field at the time where people were starting to do that and really valuing the ability to see a play done well and not just done like a crappy Christmas pageant. So, but actually have actors do it and see how it might work. So this is another, rendering of a pageant wagon. You probably have gotten the idea by now. Some more pictures. This is a double wagon. This is at Toronto. This is one of the this is the spot where the good acoustics were. They're using two wagons. They've got one here, and then they've put another one here. I think you can probably see, take a guess. What does that look like it's rendering? If you said it's the nativity with the shepherds coming to visit the baby Jesus, you are right. You have a star up here, and you have Mary in a manger. Not sure if that's Joseph or what. And these three guys are clearly not kings, so they must be the shepherds that are coming to visit. So we don't know whether pageant wagons might have been used in double tandem like this, or like the other pictures, wide like this, or what if you have this pageant wagon, let's say my phone is a pageant wagon, right? Here it is, and you're performing. What happens if you turn the wagon this way? It's what's called end on. What does that do from a staging perspective? So there have been people who've experimented with that. Why do we assume that it's wider than it is deep? Why couldn't it possibly be the other way around? And I've seen some effective uses of that. Oh, hit pause and try and figure out what that one is. This is from an episode that I don't believe is really taught in the Catholic Church anymore. It's called The Harrowing of Hell. And it's the explanation of what did Jesus do between the time that he died on the cross and the time that he reappeared in his resurrection. He seems to have, been gone for a couple of days. What was going on with that? So people, those church fathers really wanted to explain all of those types of questions. And so the story arose that he went down to hell and let all the good people out, because before Christ, anybody, when they died, went to this underworld. That's just where they were. And without Christ's sacrifice, you don't have a heaven. That's sort of the logic there. So he goes to the underworld to get the people. So in this piece, I think actually what you got here, this is God the Father. And this, I think, is Christ being represented as a knight who's going to battle for all those people. This is from the York cycle. I took this picture. I was watching this one. They've rendered sort of some medieval images up here of the people who were in hell, including Adam and Eve and various other folks. This guy looks like a king. This guy, what does that look like? I'll tell you, his head is on a platter. Is John the Baptist. Had his head chopped off. These are various other folk. The ladies in the black with the little red things are devils. So do you remember we were talking about the hell mouth being the entrance to hell? That's what they've tried to represent over here. And notice that it is on the left hand of God. These devils, this is my favorite story about this production, which was really rather funny, was that the devils were so interesting to the little children who were watching this, that the little children followed the devils. When the wagon moved on, they went to run after them, and their parents had to go and get them. And I think that if that doesn't say something about what the environment of these pageants might have been, and the fact that by this point, if we started at 6 a.m., it's probably 6 p.m. here, because Christ died at about 5 p.m. So that means children have been sitting there watching it all day, and they're still involved enough that they're running after the actors. That's pretty cool. I'll start to move a little bit faster. cut out the anecdotes. This is an image. I've been talking a lot about England. This is an image from France of the mystery play from 1547. So this is a good at least 150 years definitely 100 years after some of the plays that exist from England. But you can see that they have some sort of, and this is an illustration, these various kind of mansiones, which represent different places in the story that they're telling. But over here, you also have a lovely hellmouth and some fire, and they've actually kind of almost created kind of a ship like that giant whale image, scary whale, is very frequently part of it. And I'm wondering actually right now if it actually could possibly come from the idea of Jonah and the whale, and the fact that the whale spits Jonah up. But anyway, variations on a theme seen across Europe. Yeah, so these actors were not professional actors, or regular people, probably all men, and people would know them. So it's really kind of like community theater, where you go see the show and your friend is playing Jesus, or your friend is playing Pilate, or that there are you recognize them. And so there's a cognitive thing that happens where somebody is playing somebody that is a famous figure for you, or a religious figure for you. It's a really interesting dynamic. There's been a lot of sort of scientific discussion about what's happening when you conflate, when you have to kind of see two layers of people right there. They did not have very many rehearsals. The plays mostly are fairly short, but really people are going to be learning lines and getting up and doing it. That's generally going to be what the main thing is. When we did our, both times when I've done this, we've kind of rehearsed after school got out, spend a couple weeks with spending a couple hours a day, or maybe 4 days a week. So probably when we did the Chester piece, we probably had maybe a total of 20 on a good day, good, most 20 hours of rehearsal. And what I said before, it just takes a lot of energy because people are not quiet. They are, there's music playing over there, or there's, children running around, or there's people going, hey, there's my friend, and having a conversation with them. So the whole energy is not like people sitting in the theater and being quiet to watch the show. The other thing is, and I don't know if this happened in real life, but at Toronto, if there's a relatively loud thing that happens in one of the plays adjacent to you, so if you're at the second playing space, if the play that's coming after you has, devils or something, and there's, musical instruments being played or drums being banged on, you can hear it while you're in the middle of acting. And so there's, it's energy, but it's also focus and trying to kind of keep out all of that. I mentioned this before. Generally speaking, people would have been costumed, characters would have been costumed to represent the medieval equivalent of the biblical figures. They wouldn't have tried to, they probably didn't even have any concept of what historically accurate clothing would have been. That goes along with the fact that the script, and you'll see this when you read the second Shepherd's play, remember this, the characters, the shepherds, don't sound like Middle Eastern shepherds. Their problems are, we live in the north of England and it's cold and wet. They have the problems of the people who are watching the play. That's the problems they have, which is another reason why I made the choices I did about the play that we did, the Chester Cycle. So, and I mentioned this before, that the Pharisees look in that picture like they're wearing high priest's garb. Joseph would have looked like a medieval carpenter, those types of things. And then the masks for divine, or the opposite of divine characters, people who are not human, would be masked to demonstrate the fact that they are not human, because there's lots and lots of characters parading past you. So you need an easy way to represent that. I give you these pictures because I think they're kind of cool. This is from that Chester piece. You could see more pictures of it. This was mostly English graduate students from Purdue that did this piece. And this is God the Father over here with this awesome sort of sun mask. Here's Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve are always interesting, and in every cycle, there's multiple incarnations of Adam and Eve, generally speaking, because they appear for long enough that they cross over from one pageant to another. So it's always sort of interesting to see, how do you do the nakedness? So they were in unitards, and this Satan was a woman who was a very attractive woman. So here she is as Satan before she decides that she's going to appear in the likeness of a serpent, or what they would call a worm. That she's going to go after Eve and appear in the likeness of a worm. And if you look through, if you look through those pictures at all, you'll see the pictures of her as a woman. She's a very attractive, sexy woman in a green dress because of the snake thing. And that's kind of how she gets Eve, tempts Eve, is through a kind of, it's not a same-sex seduction, but it is very much a sort of, oh, I want to be like her. I mentioned trapdoors before. In the Middle Ages, they probably would have used real animals and not have to make masks and figure that out, because animals would have, especially barnyard animals, would have been in plentiful supply. Lots and lots and lots of music. For all kinds of reasons. You can help say this is a peaceful moment. These are, you can use music like films use music. And it's very easy to retrofit the wagons with pulleys so that you can have somebody almost sit in like a swing and winch them up and they fly up, that kind of thing. So there are these special effects that are a little bit rudimentary, but actually really effective, because everybody knows you're watching a very simple device, and that's okay. Some photos of some music, harp and set pieces. The opening fan pieces are really good because they're fairly easy to travel with. They fold up, and you can put them in these, you can use them on the wagons pretty well, and that kind of can help make your wagon look different from when it was used the last time it went round. And I think I said this, you can't imagine that the audience is sitting there quietly. And it's one of the ways that many people learn their biblical history, and therefore the sort of their religious education. Apart from going to church and hearing sermons, they were seeing these plays. There are examples of a man in a heresy trial who was asked, well, why do you think that? The particular thing he believed was questioned. And he said, well, I saw it when I was a kid. I saw it in the plays. Therefore I know it's true. So there you go. I'll stop now. I'm going to divide I just went on for a long time, so I will divide it up and give it to you in chunks so that you're not overwhelmed.